Okay, welcome to Committee of the Whole. This is August 19th, 2024, 6:01 p.m. Addie, would you call the roll?
Cobb.
Present.
Studa.
Here.
Petrus.
Here.
Larson. Here. Maddox.
Here.
Russell. Here. Posh.
Here. Okay, the first thing on the agenda is the economic development process that Director Zampt and I have worked on. And let me first thank you, Director, for helping us with in a collaborative way with this, with my original draft. I want to just say up front that we both believe that this was an essential because there was not really anything in place that provided clarity on how council and the administration collaborate on economic development projects. This is not legislation or a resolution or anything. It's just a roadmap that we can use. And I'm going to go through this process, which is basically for economic development projects on public land. I will refer you, though, for those of you looking at this, to the back page because there, for private property, there is no participation. Sometimes, if there is city participation, for instance, in the Russo deal, that kind of thing, that would come up. But we're talking about the economic development process for public property. So I'm just going to go through these steps. If anybody wants to chime in, let me know. But this is what the director and I have agreed would be a good process. First, for development projects that involve council approval, the administration informs council of the upcoming project in an executive session, at least at a meeting prior to the introduction of legislation. And that's happened several times.
Can you explain to the people who are listening tonight why this would be an executive session, please?
Why the first one will be an executive session? Yeah, because economic development projects, especially before they're made, it's very important to protect the interests of the potential developers. A lot of things can change, and traditionally, and I think for good reason, we've always done it that way, so that there is no interference in the private conversations between the administration and the developer.
Mr. President, if I might.
Yes.
And in addition, in the cases in which there's a sale or lease of city-owned real property, that's sort of an independent basis for council to consider that type of arrangement in executive session. And in other cases, you have the ability under the Ohio Revised Code to consider certain economic development requests for assistance in executive session. So I just wanted to give you the specifics.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sure.
The second step is the administration would introduce a purchase agreement. And that's basically what this is, purchase agreement in the beginning and a development agreement towards the end of the process. So the administration introduces a purchase agreement. The legislation comes up on first reading. Such legislation indicates a minimum number of engagement meetings that would need to occur prior to the later steps in the process and the potential opportunities to rescind or terminate such legislation if necessary. And this would also be done in executive session. Third, the council members can examine the site of the proposed project. I always strongly suggest that everybody do that. Seems to make a big difference. And the planning staff, and I can tell you, the one time I recently, there was a possibility, something I think I met, I'm trying to think of who it was. I know I met somebody from staff and we took a look at the site, and it was great to have them there because they can explain a lot of things that you visually may not recognize as a council member. Fourth, council members individually review the legislation itself as well as in committee of the whole, and it could be and likely could be sent to the planning committee. Council members should indicate specific things they want to see ultimately in a development agreement. At that time, this is before we even vote on a purchase agreement. And that way we can kind of look to the finish line and know what's going to happen So this is all before we vote on the purchase agreement. Anything so far?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'm concerned about everything as far as going through the committee of the whole for the purchase agreement versus being vetted through committee, so that developers feel comfortable with the committee kind of vetting it and having conversation, and then go to the committee of the whole as normal, so that we have that process of some type of fluency as far as what we've been done in the past as far as those purchase agreements.
And the only reason that's in parentheses is because we don't have to do it. And, we get a lot of legislation that we don't refer to committee, but I think that's the proper role.
To refer to.
Yeah, to refer to committee.
Thank you.
Sure. 5, council votes on the legislation in second reading ideally, but, council always reserves the right to do more than 2 readings, depending on, whether it's comfortable at the time. That's the main thing. We need to be comfortable when we vote. 6, as indicated in the purchase agreement, which council members hopefully have contributed to and as previously agreed upon, the administration and our developer have multiple public engagement opportunities for resident input. The administration will keep council informed of all these public engagement opportunities. Go ahead.
Yes,
Council
I
Vice
just want to reiterate and remind council members that the mayor did ask me, and I did ask council members to send Addie any information that they wanted to be seen in a development agreement. If you have not done so, could you just please email it to her, and then we can forward it over to the mayor as well.
It's very important. 7, periodic updates of the project are provided to council and executive session administration to provide a timeline of activities. If you were watching the second TWG project, Paul Volpe did an excellent job with always having a timeline. Whatever was done, there might have been 10 or 12 meetings, I don't remember exactly. But as we always saw what had been done and what was still yet to be done, that would be a great thing for the planning department to provide council. 8, the Architectural Board of Review and the Planning Commission have preliminary reviews of the project, allowing for potential revisions to be made by developer if requested. Administration to make clear to developer from the outset that insufficient engagement or negative reception from the staff, the Planning Commission, or the Architectural Board of Review would greatly impact in the negative council's decision-making. And then it kind of breaks this down into 2 scenarios. 1, if ABR and Planning Commission are reviewing it positively, then, it'll move forward. If ABR or the Planning Commission preliminary review is not positive, the developer is required to make a presentation to council or committee of the whole, and it could be your committee, Council Vice President, that has to see that design review is completed prior to consideration of a development. And the TWG project was a perfect example of this, because the first round we saw a lot of negative
Mr.
reviews.
President,
Yes.
I'm confused about this part of the process. My concern is that if there are any changes or any adjustments, that would first be suggested by the ABR and Planning Commission. So they would initially come back to them for those adjustments. Are you stating that between that process, your expectations, they bring that same presentation to council before they make those changes? Because part of what the Planning Commission and the ABR do is make those suggestions and those changes. And it sounds like we're kind of inserting ourselves in the middle of that process. So where are we at in terms of what
Right, well, the director suggested this. Do you want to speak to that? Or the mayor?
To address that concern, this is something that we, in an attempt to avoid the kinds of difficulties that we have seen in some of the design aspects and other related aspects in previous projects. What we'd like to do is, if it appears that there is going to be substantial resistance related to a particular aspect of the project, that it would be useful to have council as a backstop, that we could then maybe shift some of the attention into a council meeting or a committee meeting in order to have a larger conversation and hopefully bring a developer who is presenting a project that maybe is encountering a great deal of resistance more into cooperation with the city.
So then they would go back after that part of that process and then, okay, perfect. That's what I was trying to figure out where that was happening.
And I don't know, Mr. President, if Director Zanf would like to add a bit more color to that.
No, I think you stated it perfectly. It's a backstop and it's just in a case where it's not going well.
Right. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. Administration, this is number 9, administration informs council of upcoming development agreement in executive session, at least one meeting prior to introduction, and then of course it is introduced, step 10, and legislation is presented on first reading. Committee of the Whole reviews the legislation itself and hopefully votes, again, always Director Zamp, always ideally on second reading. And then if there is, provided that everything goes well, in number 8, 8A in particular, then ABR and Planning Commission can continue to review the project, until it's ready to move forward. This is that would be after we agree on a development agreement. So that means that we're comfortable enough and we know that ABR and the Planning Commission are just gonna do some tweaking, minor tweaking. There's no big problems. That makes sense to everybody?
I was just gonna ask if Director Zamp had any clarifications or any comments on the document.
No, we had, between the mayor and I, we had met with the council president a bunch of times on this, so I think it's reflected in the document that we presented tonight.
Okay.
So I just think it's good,
And you're okay,
Oh, sorry, yeah, go ahead.
and you're okay with my statement as far as trying to vet things through the committee versus trying to put a developer on the spot and then bring it to the committee of the whole?
Yeah, I think we would want it, not having to come to both
Yeah.
bodies, but
Okay.
just one.
Okay, thank you.
So this is something, again, it's a roadmap. And it would be good for all of us to just take this out, before something or when something is presented. So we just kind of refresh ourselves and then we can follow it exactly as written or, see how, we're not bound to it, but I we did a lot of work on this and I think it's a good process. Any comments or questions? All right, again, thank you, Director Zanth and Mayor, for collaborating on this with us. So Bricker Graydon, this is the next agenda item, Bricker Graydon Law Firm. So I think everybody knows that Guidehouse is no longer our consultant, and I'll leave this to the law director to introduce our new consultant.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. President. So Jeff Harris, who's working with us on ARPA along with some others at Bricker, can give more detail. But Bricker and Eckler was a longtime, very large public entity-focused law firm in Ohio that in 2023 merged with a firm called Graydon, Head and Ritchie. And so now it is Bricker Graydon. So that's where the name comes from. Both firms actually have a very long history in Ohio, and Bricker in particular with public entities. As we were sort of going through the transition earlier this year from Guidehouse to some new status and trying to figure out how to really get into the operational moving forward mode, we reached out to Bricker, being aware of their substantial experience dealing with ARPA matters and advising local governments. And again, Jeff can detail that a little bit more. But after reaching out to them, having a preliminary meeting in late June, the city ended up entering into an engagement letter the last week of June, having a kickoff meeting in early July. And since then, we've made a lot of progress in pinning down answers to some of the questions that we've been wrestling with. And I think that's one of the things that the city staff has most appreciated about working with Bricker is the ability to get, yes and no answers. And it allows us to, move through the flow chart more efficiently. So with that, I would introduce Jeffrey Harris from Bridger Grading.
You want me up at the podium, is that fair?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, everybody. Like Bill said, my name is Jeff Harris. I'm with Bridger Grading. I'm out of the Columbus office, although I'm a native West Sider. So when I come on the east side, I gotta remember where's my MapQuest, ways. I'm dating myself. I don't know the east side so well. Lakewood, I'm good. But I'm glad to be here and I'm happy to talk with you all about ARPA. Like Bill said and Chris has learned, I think, about us, I try to put everything in ARPA as much as we can into yes and no answers. And so we're gonna walk you through some of those yeses and nos. But I have several slides here that I'll present on. Right now, our book of business for ARPA is about 3 dozen to almost 40 public sector clients for ARPA. We are the City of Cleveland's ARPA Council. We are the City of Baltimore, Maryland's ARPA Council. They're the 7th and 8th largest ARPA recipients in the country, totaling about $1.1 billion. So what we've been doing for them is, and we go all the way down to the smallest Jefferson Township in Washington County, right on the Ohio River, right? The questions are all the same. What can we use our ARPA money on? How in the world do we paper it up? How do we protect ourselves in the event of an audit? And then how do we push out the money? So the questions are the same, whether you're dealing with Baltimore or you're dealing with that Jefferson Township down on the Ohio River. But I'm gonna walk you through what it is we do as a firm. And please pepper me with questions. I've been doing ARPA for about, I guess, over 3 years now, if I do my math right. So as I told Bill and Chris, we have just about seen everything. Who knows, there may be something that really hits us for a loop, but generally speaking, we've seen affordable housing, we've seen vacant abandoned buildings, we've seen loan products. I've got a project down I-77 that I was working on this morning. It's all about affordable housing projects. So, and I know Chris and Bill and I are working on that for a couple projects here in the city. So, with no further ado, we talk about eligible uses. That's where most of my time is spent right now. Through the end of this year, you've got to encumber your funds. So through the end of December, everyone is asking, can I use my ARPA money for X, Y, and Z? Because I have to encumber my funds or obligate the funds by the end of this year. Then we get into, in parallel, this isn't necessarily linear. But then, okay, I want to spend my money. How do I go out and procure the goods and services? Do I have to follow federal procurement? Possibly. Do I have to follow state procurement? And then finally, I'll talk to you about what the project pipeline has been through Chris and Bill's office. There are 4 buckets, really there are 6, but we're gonna make this easy peasy. Basically, ARPA is in what I call 4 buckets. Your first bucket is response to COVID-19. Your second bucket, which we don't see a whole lot of anymore as far as premium pay to essential workers. Third bucket is everyone's favorite. That is the revenue loss category. I'll talk to you about that in a second. And then fourth bucket is water, sewer, and broadband. So when we think about each one of these, when we respond to COVID-19, it creates a whole lot of rigmarole in terms of following federal procedures. And responding to COVID-19 and the final rule is about 220 pages. It's everything from buying PPE and masks during the public health emergency, all the way through affordable housing, vacant abandoned buildings, and educational disparities for kids. So it is an entire continuum of things that we're responding to COVID-19, either the health effects or the negative economic impacts. And if you're in this world, you're dealing with federal subrecipients, which has a whole meaning. We can talk about that. We don't see too much of this anymore. These are folks that actually literally showed up on job site during the pandemic. Think of the road crews that had 3 guys in the cab and you say, my God, I hope they're all wearing masks and they're out coughing on each other. Those folks got premium pay back in the day. We don't see a whole lot of that anymore. Third bucket is everyone's favorite because it can be used to fund any function of government to the extent of the city's loss of revenue that arose from the pandemic itself. So, and there are 2 ways to calculate loss of revenue. The Treasury Department said, we are going to assume every governmental entity in the entire United States had at least $10 million in revenue loss. From that tiny little Jefferson Township on the Ohio River I told you about, all the way up to the City of Cleveland, the City of Baltimore, Maryland. Treasury said, we're going to assume every one of you had at least $10 million in revenue loss. You may say, well, wait a second, that Jefferson Township only got $300,000 in ARPA. That's okay. That means their entire ARPA allocation was deemed revenue loss. And I'll tell you why this is important here in a second. Many communities said, no, Treasurer, you can keep your 10,000. We're actually gonna go ahead and measure what our revenue loss was from the pandemic. City of Cleveland, as an example, I think they measured $243 million. This is a rough number, so if there's media, don't quote me, but I think it was about 240 million. It's public record. They actually went through the analysis and said, no, we actually lost $240 million in revenue from the pandemic. So we are going to designate all of $240 million for ARPA cash into this government functionality bucket. We'll talk about that in a little bit more. And then finally, you can use your ARPA cash under what we call the fourth bucket for water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure, what's deemed as necessary. When you're in the fourth bucket, you are back in that subrecipient vendor category under US Treasury guidelines. When you're when you're under this one, you don't have to worry about all those federal designations. This is why it's everyone's favorite. Not very many strings attached in the third bucket. So, in the third bucket, why is it everyone's favorite? Because it doesn't have to be a direct connection back to COVID-19. So long as it is a government service for the city to do it, it is a eligible use of ARPA cash. And because the Treasury presumes that really anything that happened to reduce the city's revenue is due to COVID-19. And that means we don't have to worry about subrecipients, we don't have to worry about a lot of the federal, what's called the uniform guidance. For those of you who deal with federal grants, this is the most exciting aspect of your professional career, knowing the uniform guidance. I, of course, am talking in jest. 2 CFR Part 200 is among the most boring stuff you ever read. But importantly, it makes things like subawards. And it says things like, thou shalt follow everything from the federal government all the way down the cascade waterfall of subrecipients and subawards. But here, we don't have to worry about that. Third bucket, revenue loss, as long as it's a government function of the city can use the ARPA money for that purpose. Makes sense. But if we're in that first bucket, response to COVID-19, think affordable housing, because I know we've got a couple projects in this. Think about some of the other things that are in the mix for the city. If you're in the first bucket as a response to COVID-19, you create a subrecipient. And the US Treasury says if you're a subrecipient, you're getting your money from the city and you're gonna step right into the shoes of the city of Cleveland Heights. And you have to, subrecipient, follow all the federal procurement, all the federal asset handling, all the federal reporting. And so when we advise our clients, and most of my clients, actually almost all my clients are public sector clients, they say, well, the particular that we want to give the money to, they don't want to deal with all that federal regulations. I said, they sure don't. But they have to, because if it's a response to COVID-19, they're going to have to sign a sub-grant, and they're going to have to follow everything that you would, client, because everything has to be reported right back up to Treasury. Steps into the shoes of, because it is in effect carrying out a federal program. Vendors and contractors, they're two different terms, the same thing. Under ARPA, contractors are selected to provide goods or services to the city itself. And there's a 5-part test. I will not bore you with that. But know that there are contractors, there are beneficiaries. So these are folks actually harmed by COVID-19. These are folks that are actually, think about nonprofits or households that may have had a negative economic impact. They receive money from the city, they don't have to report, right? So if they're being helped, a nonprofit or a person, a resident of the city, and they are receiving ARPA funds to have helped them out, they don't have to report themselves, they just say thank you for the funds. Maybe they get a 1099 from you at the year end, but they don't have to worry about all the federal regulations, if that makes sense. This is the part I always want to remind our clients for, is that yes, you may have read that you don't have to follow federal procurement and under ARPA in a particular case, but my God, remember there are always state procurement requirements. And the Treasury says that thou shalt follow the most strict of the two. So you get into purchase amounts of contracts, micro purchases, small purchases. Really, you start looking at things like $10,000 or less, or $250,000 or more. You start to see some of the federal guidelines kick in. Similarly with the state guidelines. These things only matter on procurement when we're dealing with the first, the second, or the fourth buckets. Remember, that's response to COVID-19, premium pay to essential workers. That sounds funny, but we still have to adhere to this, or water, sewer, and broadband. Okay, you have to follow both sets, and sometimes we get our clients to say, "Oh my gosh, we did federal, but we forgot state," or vice versa. And typically, what we also see is our public clients are like, "No, our engineering department, they're Johnny on the spot. They know their state procurement laws backwards and forwards." And we say, "Great, just make sure that you're following the most strict of the two." This again, on the third bucket, most of the requirements of the federal guidance go away because there is no subrecipient relationship. There are a few things that third bucket has to follow. This is really for the folks who really get it, like in the room who maybe none of you, who like to get into the nitty gritty of the uniform guidance. General provisions, audit, the federal single audit is a requirement for folks to get third bucket ARPA, which I know sometimes scares the bejesus out of people. Anything over $750,000 in receipts from the federal government gets subject to a federal single audit. This is my most scientific of notations. I show this usually to get a laugh because folks say, "Okay, how do you know what's at play, which is third bucket?" I say, "Oh, I have this incredibly scientific manner of doing this." And that is, I printed off the US Treasury guidance when it came out, and I literally just started writing on it. And so on third bucket, there are all these ARPA corrections, CFR requirements, federal uniform guidance that says how do you handle property? How do you sell property? How do you have to worry about competition to procure goods? In the third bucket, per my hyper scientific notations here, you don't have to worry about any of it. And so when I get a phone call from a client, they say, "Oh, I've got third bucket. I don't know if I have to follow this or not." I literally page back in my 3-ring binder and I say, "You don't have to worry about 200-309. You may proceed." But that's because the Treasury, about 2 years ago, came out with a list and just said, "These are the areas you have to worry about. These are the areas you don't have to worry about." Prevailing wage is always a big deal. And so I had a client today who said, "I don't have to have federal prevailing wage, right?" I said, "Possibly." And they said, "That means there's no prevailing wage need to be paid at all." I said, No, time out. Because although federal Davis-Bacon prevailing wage may not apply, always remember your state prevailing wages may apply. This gets into really contested areas when the trades are watching these federal ARPA grants go out and say, "Wait a second, who's got that project? How was that bid out? Are the trades involved? What are the wage rates on?" I see this more at play south of I-70 in Ohio in my practice as opposed to up here, based on just union involvement in local communities. It's not as so much of a thought area here as it is south of I-70 state. So the way that Bill, Chris, and I and our team have been working is Chris and Bill throw us projects and say, "We've got some idea that council either approve this or they want to move forward. Could you let us know how this fits in the ARPA ecosystem? Is it eligible? Could you help us with the paperwork?" We'll go ahead and take it in. We'll do the eligible use determination. We've given Chris and Bill some sample documents that they can fill out, and then we'll give our answers back to the city law department. And so far, that's been working quite well, I'd say. I'm just self-serving when I say that, but I think it's working pretty well.
Agreed.
And so I'll pause there, and I'll walk you through the projects we've been looking for in the city to date. Does anybody have any questions? I know I'm a fast talker. That's not all caffeine. I just had a lot I want to get out to you.
Keep going.
Ma'am?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I do assume that you're going to speak to those entities that were classified as sub-recipients by Guidehouse.
So, right. Let me answer it this way. Sometimes the advice that I've seen as to how things fit within ARPA may not be entirely accurate.
Thank you.
And that's not just for the city. We have a number of deals around Ohio that the advice given was that this is clearly a sub-grant or a sub-award, or that's a sub-recipient relationship. And I've had to say, no, it isn't. It's third bucket, as an example. There's no sub-award in third bucket. Oh, that's right. So we gotta rework all the documents. I would, without getting into specifics or rattling. There was a little bit of that. I think that Chris and Bill and I were able to clean that up.
All right, thank
Is
you.
that- is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. You see how careful I was with that? So, we've been working with Chris and Bill, and we have reviewed and given eligible use determinations for all the projects that I have on these next several slides. Every one of these projects, we came back with a determination that is an eligible use of ARPA under one of those buckets. Either it fits best under the third bucket, which is the revenue loss, so it's a city government function, or it's an appropriate use of ARPA because it's a response to COVID-19. Margaret Wagner, Senior Partners, is a great example. I believe Chris and Bill helped me remember, but I think we came down that was an appropriate use of first bucket response to COVID-19 because this is a senior housing product that houses folks, I think 30% AMI or lower. And so as a response to COVID-19 economic impact, it is perfectly allowable to use your first bucket ARPA to assist folks with low income housing, right? Versus like Coventry Sid we looked at, that is a third bucket, if I'm remembering correctly, right, Chris? Third bucket because the business entrepreneurial support, the the storefront facade improvements, those don't fit that first bucket response to COVID-19. They could, but not really. Sometimes you can if they're in what's called a qualified census tract. The HUD group says this is an area that is particularly marked for low income. Coventry Sid was not. So we said, you know what, it cannot fit that first bucket. It has to fit in the third bucket as just a mere government service for the city of Cleveland Heights. Does that make sense? Okay. Similarly on this next group, we had a couple of projects that they were in the city schools with art support, teacher support, art and music. Those things you can address educational disparities within your student cohort, but the kids have to live in a qualified census tract or the school itself has to be in a qualified census tract. And most importantly, the nonprofit at play has to track those kids. That gets really hairy. So our advice to Chris and Bill was make these third bucket because unless those nonprofits are staffed up and can carry the data and can point out that yes, all our kids in Artful live in QCTs, it's gonna be hairy. Chris, did I say that all right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
yes, sir.
So my understanding is that for some of these groups, Artful, for example, we already have contracts with the groups. Is that right?
Artful is one of the revenue replacement ones, and we're currently reviewing their project proposals that the prior consultant had reviewed, and we're making some corrections that needed to be made.
Okay, so I guess maybe taking a step back. So are there any groups here that have already received contracts that we have to write new contracts for, depending upon moving them to a new bucket? Or is that not?
Building Heights would be an example of that.
Okay.
That we entered contract with them and then determined that because of everything they wanted to do, the only really safe way of going about it would be to move them over to revenue replacement.
Okay. So if I could ask one more thing, about how many groups would you say have to have a contract redone?
I believe Building Heights is the only one that needs to need to be redone.
Okay.
Because we had pumped the brakes on the ones that we had a good inclination.
Okay.
We're gonna fall into that category, and so we held off on those until we had a chance to get Ricker to take a look at them.
Okay.
Okay, Cleveland, if I'm saying it correctly, Hesed Center, it's got the food bank service, completely legit use of first bucket ARPA to help with food insecurity. So that's a great example that's one that went out first bucket. It's restricted ARPA use, and the food banks have been deemed as an appropriate use as a response to COVID-19. Similarly with Journey Center for Safety and Healing, dealing with domestic violence and the victim advocate services here in the court. We've worked with Chris and Bill on the city-owned parking garage elevators. There are certain elements of those elevator renovation projects that could be covered with ARPA under the first bucket response to COVID-19. Okay. Touchless services and the HVAC that may be installed in the elevator car. Those things are virus mitigation, And it may sound like a stretch, but it is, we've run to the bank with that argument. So when you think about building improvements, so long as it's, again, touchless, surfaces, HVAC, things that allow for virus mitigation efforts, you can use your first bucket response to COVID-19 money. Balance of the project, you would then use your third bucket revenue loss, if that makes sense. Okay. Road repair and resurfacing, I had said at the start that there are 4 buckets of ARPA, there are really 6. About a year and a half into ARPA, Treasury added 2 more. Actually, Congress did. One is a response to emergencies, natural disasters. The other one is road surfacing projects. And we went through and we determined that the road resurfacing that Chris and Bill were working with you all on, there was an element to which we could say that was an appropriate use of what we call the 6th bucket, road resurfacing projects. And then finally, Chris and I and Bill are working through some. We haven't done a full-fledged review, but we're prepared to work with Chris and Bill on lead safe programming. The 2 that are in front of us right now that I want to get responses back to Bill and Chris on are the Start Right CDC and the Future Heights projects. And I believe that's it. So I'm happy to take questions, thoughts.
Go ahead.
One of the components of the Start Right CDC is their food bank, so are you gonna break that out and look at them separately?
We will. Right now, we're looking at the affordable housing where we're looking
Yeah.
under contract to buy the 23 lots
Right.
through you and the land bank.
That's
We're
already
looking at
done.
that right now. When the food bank operations comes up through Chris and Bill and I, we'll work through that as a separate matter. Because it has a different type of analysis than the affordable housing.
2 quick questions. So one, is there a timeline for when we could expect to hear about Start Right and Future Heights?
So I had committed to Bill that he'll get our answers within, I'll say, a week.
Okay.
Okay, so but then it'll be Bill and Chris to then, obviously review our work and then advise you.
Okay, and the other question, is there a limitation to how much money could be used for road repair and resurfacing?
No, you could, conceivably, all right. Conceivably, you could use your entire ARPA allocation for road resurfacing. Okay. Right, that's a policy call, not a legal one.
Okay,
right?
great.
Yes, sir.
So I'm new on council and, I came in thinking that most of the stuff would all be behind us, but it seems like you're revisiting work that the city has already paid for. Has there been it seems like you've had to do a lot. And I'm just trying to look for some kind of measure of how much work have you had to redo from a consultant that had been paid, $250,000?
Let me try to put it to you this way.
If I
Yeah,
could,
no,
sorry,
please.
Jeff,
Yeah, no.
Jeff hasn't been made privy to all of the work that Guidehouse did for the city or did with the city. We've teed up questions as they've come up in order to get the nonprofits out, starting in about June, late May to June, July, and to take other next steps based upon where we were in terms of the information that we had. But they're not engaged to analyze the quality or sufficiency of the work that was done or look at it specifically, et cetera. So with that caveat, I have no objection to, you're talking about that.
I'll the one thing I'll say is at 3 years in, we're quite efficient. So when Bill and Chris have been asking us, could you look at this or this new project, or we just wanna make sure we've got everything dusted up just right. What we're able to do is basically go into, all right, we've seen this across these number of clients, we know what the answer is. We need to make sure we understand what the project specifics are for Cleveland Heights, but I think we're turning things around quite quickly without letting the meter run, if that makes sense, right?
So I will tell you from my personal perspective, this is a breath of fresh air. It seems like we're on track of things that should have been done a long time ago. And yes, I brought some historical elements into this because, maybe me and other members are frustrated with that work. And it would be helpful, it's clearly not in Bricker's scope, but maybe within our scope, is there some time that either the law department or whoever runs this from the city perspective can meet with council and just sort of give us a review of maybe what went wrong with that. And this is a little bit out of scope. I don't necessarily need to have an answer this very second.
So I think that
I'll turn it over to you in just a quick second.
Sure.
I don't necessarily have a problem with sort of an after action report. and taking a look at where this entire process sort of maybe deviated from efficiency and effectiveness. I think we should probably get through the end of this year
That's what I was
first,
gonna say.
and then take a holistic look. And I would suggest that holistic look starts in the initial phase of this discussion, which was when we first got our $19 million allocation.
Go ahead.
I think we're all aware of the end of year deadline. And so, or milestone, maybe. One of the things that council allocated funds to were business grants, 1.2 million. So do we need to specify which businesses will receive those funds by the end of the year? So right now, I think they just says something like, business grants, something vague like that. And my understanding was that we were going to have an application process similar to what we had for the nonprofits. So do we need to have that process and allocate funds to these recipients by the end of this year?
You need to have the funds obligated, so the obligation, US Treasury says an obligation is by a contract. So as to the extent you've got businesses receiving funds from the city as either a third bucket revenue loss, which is just a government service, or as a response to COVID-19 because they actually had quantifiable business revenue loss from the pandemic. I think my quick answer to you on the fly here is you would want those papered up. Beyond just appropriation from the council, it has to then go into the contract.
So
Go ahead.
I guess if I could follow that up, could we get a status of the small business assistance? Because we received this presentation tonight that says ARPA small business request, and I just am not aware of what's going on with it. I personally am frustrated that 8 months have passed, and I would like for this to become available to folks. At the very least, I think that we should put in the newsletter that this is coming, even if we don't have an application available yet. So do we have a status on where this is at?
Go ahead, Mayor.
I think he probably gave you the status, but I think there's additional conversation that I think the administration and the council need to have about the actual effectiveness of what council allocated in the first place. That's gonna be a tough discussion, but I think it's one that we need to have. And so going from there, maybe this will come in the future, maybe the next month or so, that we have a conversation about what council's decision-making process was and how we might need to adjust it in order to effectively spend this money in a way that addresses concerns in the community that don't get clawed back by the federal government at some point in the future. Okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Is there any chance that the monies are gonna get clawed back by the federal government?
There's always a chance of that if we don't do it right.
But you're gonna make sure we do it right.
My comment to Bill and Chris is we are laser focused on airtight audits. When on-site auditors, either auditor of state, who's now looking at these, or the US Treasury, when they show up on premises, and they will, and they pull certain projects for testing, it's our intention that project files are airtight. There's an eligible use memo. There's properly written up council legislation. There are the paperwork that actually shows the money going out the door, so that there's no question that in the auditor's minds, oh, I see exactly where the breadcrumbs lead me as to how these ARPA funds are spent.
President Kuda?
Yes.
I would like to ask, since this is so critical, this December 31st deadline, if we can get updates on ARPA each regular council meeting or council committee of the whole meeting as we go through the next few months? Like if contracts have gone out or people have received their monies, those kinds of things?
So that wouldn't have to be
Correct,
with,
yeah.
could we do?
I think that's fine. I mean, it may be different in scope or scale,
Yeah.
from one meeting to the
Yeah.
next, but yeah.
Understood.
Thank you.
Councilman?
I think this also leads back to a conversation that we had in the finance committee meeting about the importance of discussing our responsibilities with that, because this is pretty clear where that process is, but we've got our own projects and allocations that haven't been buttoned up. And we're at a point where, and I'm even talking about things like, for the public's example, the shipping containers. It's either now, not, what are we gonna do with this money, how we're gonna allocate that. And so I think that goes back to having those work sessions and really working through this and finalizing that. I think that's gonna absolutely be critical to helping this process. But I think while the administration is working on this portion, I think council needs to pull back and really dig into those outstanding projects and decide if we are going to spend that money, if we need the money to be allocated, and if not, where else can we put it? I think that'll be absolutely helpful because at least from where I'm sitting and what I'm hearing, even with my project, I know that there's some money that's going to be shifted, that we're gonna have to figure out where to allocate and put that money, and that's squarely on council. And I know we had that conversation about expectations and dates for our finance department, but I would like to iron out some of those work sessions to really get that concretized, so we can at least get that information over to finance.
Now, when you say work sessions, are you talking about finance committee work sessions?
So I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to speak for anyone who was at the finance meeting, but we talked about work sessions in terms of working through that process, whether it's committee of the whole session or
Okay.
finance. And really squaring out down what those amounts look like, those final allocations, and then what to do with any of that money. Because just based on some of the information she needed, it was critical. And the reason I'm bringing that up, and I apologize, is because part of that, as a council, we talked about in finance, was some of these projects from a budgetary standpoint, and whether or not there's some requests that might be coming through for 2025 that we could have handled in 2024 had we reallocated some of the funds now. So that might shape or change some of the needs assessments from the departments. So I think that there's a lot to handle. And so one of the things we talked about was a broader committee meeting to discuss that.
And we could do that in the finance committee, but we also should probably just have a running
Yes.
agenda item so that we're addressing it on the two regular meetings. I just wanna, Mayor, I'm gonna call on you in a second, but I wanna piggyback on what the councilman was saying. So this is a little bit of a turn here, but
Yep.
is our loss of revenue, the assessment of our loss of revenue, did you find it to be accurate?
Did the city do $10 million, Chris?
Right.
Yeah, so, and so long as there were Excel-based calculations that could have been run, but for a city this size with our allocation, there were many communities of your similar size who took the $10 million standard.
So it was accurate,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And the reason I'm asking that now is the follow-up part is, I guess what I wanna know is when will the administration give us legislation that moves the 5 million, or I don't know what amount it's gonna be, Mayor, and maybe that's where you were headed, into our basically revenue replacement and in a sense, our general fund, which takes the heat off of the deadlines.
So yeah, in response to that, and in response to Councilman Maddox's comment, that is an example. The shipping container proposal is an example of one of the things we need to have an uncomfortable conversation about. And with the potential in mind for reallocating those dollars to a project that would be more effective and more acceptable under ARPA regulations. So and with that in mind, our $10 million limit on revenue replacement is an important consideration. And the result of that limitation is that we need to reevaluate some of the allocations that council made in the first place. And that's why we need to have these conversations as quickly as we can. But some of the reason for a bit of both concern and not confusion, but uncertainty related to the $10 billion revenue replacement question and whether or not we are going to reallocate, whether it's $5 or $6 million of otherwise allocated funded projects through this allocation the council made. That's what we're working through now. What our actual $10 million is going to be.
Mhm.
And then those projects that we may have to put on the back burner or deprioritize. The money that's unused related to those projects, if we are incapable due to the limitation of using them in the revenue replacement bucket, bucket 3, then we have to figure out the more effective way to expend those dollars.
Well, if it comes down to bucket 6, which I think is the road paving and so forth, I mean, I think we had a 30-second conversation about this one time. That's my recollection. And I think what would be good is if we have some stuff teed up, you know, kind of just in case, because there may be agreement, I don't know, we haven't had a, you know, discussion with all of council, but if there is agreement with council that that would be a good use of, let's just say, reallocated monies, you know, since we have to have contracts in place, you know, trying to make, maybe that could happen.
My concern is, we allocated, when the ARPA monies first came, $1 million for businesses. And if we're talking about backing it up, we're already in August. We have a deadline of December. We have no application. We have nothing for the businesses to even apply for that $1 million. What do you see moving forward to get that process moving quickly?
Well, it'd be to the council member's question over here, which is, you know, do we have to have that papered up in a contract? You do. So then it would be a matter of like anything else, implementing it through the city's resources to get an application.
Do you have an example of an application for businesses that we could use, and so it would be something quick where we could actually adopt it for Cleveland Heights, for businesses to be able to apply, at least get that portion of the ball rolling so that applications are coming in?
Yes, ma'am. So there were two communities, one in central Ohio, one in southwestern Ohio, who asked us, could you write the applications and the guidelines yourself? We said, sure. So we actually have that. That was to the gentleman's question. We're pretty efficient because we've seen this stuff already. So to your question, yes, I have stuff on the shelf, if you like,
Yes.
or if you will, if the city wishes to proceed.
Did you also help with the county's application for their business?
No,
Grants?
only in City of Cleveland.
City of Cleveland, you do the counties?
No, ma'am.
Okay,
No.
all right. I would really like to see something moving with that because we've already agreed and said 1 million will go into the businesses and nothing has been done as of yet. And I'm afraid if we keep backing it up, it's gonna take time for those applications to come in, for them to get the paperwork done and all those different things that's needed to apply and to get funding and to be able to say those that could be allocated, and December comes very quickly.
Councilman, we're gonna have to wrap this up, go ahead.
So I just kind of want to reiterate the bucket number 6 idea and having an escape hatch. I mean, you know, spending money on roads can be very equitable in this city depending on if we are truly, you know, funding road projects in all the diverse areas of our city. And it seems like it's a slam dunk to have that in our back pocket so we don't lose anything. You know, but I also think we need to be realistic when we look at some of the things that are on this list that are not gonna get done and be equitable. I mean, I can't imagine how we could have someone fill out an application, a small business, and have that application looked at quick enough and judged against other businesses in an equitable way that we can make a decision and paper a deal by the end of the year. It just seems like that's sunsetted already, just knowing how long everything has taken thus far. So we should have maybe we can try it, maybe we could do it.
Maybe we can put it in another bucket, but to make sure they are able to get it so it's not under that timeline.
Mr. Council President, if I could, real quick, the road resurfacing, I just wanna be careful, a slam dunk, it's when a lawyer's head spin. They have to fit under the federal RAISE program, R-A-I-S-E, you know, my mind's escaped me what the R-A-I-S-E stands for, but they have to fit within that federal type of road surfacing project. So it may not be every alleyway, thoroughfare in the city. So it may be that some of your road projects, because I think the ones we looked at were okay, but they were specific projects that, thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much
yeah.
for all of this. This
Appreciate
was very reassuring. We needed that. Thank you. The next agenda item is Rio Pardo Energy, and I just want to say, is it okay, can I call a little bit of an audible here, because this is like a football game, it's timed, and our regular meeting is more like a baseball game. You know, it could be 2.5 hours, but it could be longer. So I can give you a little, if we skip this here, we can give you a little extra time in there. Is that okay?
That's fine with us.
Okay, and we will do that. We will do that. Thank you. So we're gonna go to legislative review, and I guess okay, so the first 1, 2, 3 are resolutions for consideration for adoption tonight. The first is a resolution appointing James Nemistil to the Landmark Commission. Any questions about that? Okay, the second one is a resolution appointing Lorna Rudolph to the Cedar Lee Special Improvement District.
As a equalization board.
Yeah, right, to the Assessment and Equalization Board, thank you, yeah, not to the actual SID. We had to get, the third person I had appointed was not a homeowner, so this person is a retired teacher from Cleveland Heights High School, and she's a homeowner. The third resolution, 151, is resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with Best Equipment as opposed to,
Old Dominion,
or something that
Old
wasn't,
Dominion
okay.
brush, yeah.
So that's for the leaf deck.
It's just a revision of the one you guys already passed.
Any questions about that? All right, on first reading only, we have an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into, this is 152, authorizing the mayor to enter into a energy savings agreement contract with Leopardo. I'm gonna assign that to municipal services, but does anybody wanna discuss, well, we will have an opportunity to discuss it more in a regular meeting unless somebody has a burning, yes, go ahead.
Because that will come back to Municipal Services Committee for discussion, we have a meeting on August 26th at 10 a.m. If someone from Leopardo could be there, that would be very much appreciated.
That happened.
All right, thank you.
Or Zoom, either way.
Yeah, Zoom is fine too, we can Zoom.
Is that okay with you, Councilwoman?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's fine.
okay. The next three first readings are Arts Commission, Community Improvement Corporation, 153 is Arts Commission, 154 and 155 are Community Improvement Corporation. I'm gonna assign those three to admin serve. 156 is the resolution appointing, or it's actually reappointing, or is it appointing?
Appointing for a new term.
Okay, appointing for a new term, Councilwoman Gail Larson to Donebrook. You have a question?
Yes, on 151, or I guess on 154, there's an application and a resume for the nominee. 155, there isn't an application or resume. Is it possible to receive more information about the nominee? Okay, great, thank you.
Don't worry.
I emailed you about it.
Okay, good, glad you caught that.
And all three of these are going to admin services, correct?
Yes.
That's good.
And then Larson to Donebrook Watershed Partnership Board of Trustees. Do they meet monthly?
Bi-monthly.
Bi-monthly, okay. Second readings,
For some reason, we just can't go ahead and make that appointment
It wasn't
tonight.
requested, but we could.
Remember Larson to the watershed?
Oh,
I have no objection. Anybody?
I have none.
We'll just have to make the amendment to the agenda.
All right. Here's the big enchilada, second reading. Ordinance 127, an ordinance establishing salary schedules, position classifications, and other compensation and benefits for officers and employees of the city and declaring, well, I take it we'll have questions here or comments. Go ahead.
The comments come from the Finance Committee, which met this past week, and we discussed this ordinance. The Finance Committee, the guest at that meeting was Acting Finance Director Schuster. So we asked questions like within this ordinance, all of these redlined items, the changes, the increases, are the 3% COLA increases? Yes. And as reflected in this ordinance, and they have been included in the 2024 budget. Yes. The Archer reports analysis is not included in the salary schedules, position classifications, and other compensation. Acting Director Schuster reported that the Archer report findings are due in September, so She is preparing to look at any of those recommendations that may need to be incorporated into the 2025 budget calculations. And at this point, the committee, Counselor Pash and Counselor Maddox and I agreed to move it forward to council for a vote.
Okay. Anybody else find anything in here that you wanna comment on or question? I had one question for Interim Director Schuster. I'm on page 10. The board and commission members, $90 per meeting, does that represent a raise for them? No. Well, I don't know. I was on the Cleveland School Board 30 years ago, and I got $80 for each meeting we went to 30 years ago. But I'm not saying that directly applies to this, but I guess if nobody's complaining,
I just have a question.
Yeah.
Have the wage and salary thing been done yet?
That's what this is.
Huh?
Yeah.
No, I mean, I'm sorry.
The archery study.
Yes,
Oh, yeah, no, we don't have those results. We don't have those results yet, the Archer, yeah, that's not included in this.
so, yeah, because I noticed that, I know everyone got a 3% raise, but I still noticed that some of the salaries on the lower end was still kind of low. I was wondering what was happening with that, so that hopefully maybe once that come out, people, some of the employees on the lower end will get a little more raise.
They're gonna recommend all that.
Yes, okay, thank you.
all right. I'll, and then the rest is the consent agenda.
Well, no, you got a bunch of second readings. Remember you
Did I
had,
skip?
remember you
Oh,
had the add-on.
yeah, I don't have the new.
Mhm.
Yeah, then, I'm sorry, second readings on appointments to the Transportation Committee and Environmental Sustainability Committee. And then the consent agenda. Okay, let me go back to here. All right, ladies and gentlemen in the room, we're gonna have an executive session now. So, Professor Cobb.
I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of considering the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of any public employee or public official, the investigation of charges or complaints against the public employee, official, licensee, or contractee of the city, or one who seeks to be an employee, licensee, or contractee of the city.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? Do you have to call roll?
Cobb,
Aye.
Kuda,
Aye.
Petrus.
Aye.
Larson.
Aye.
Maddox.
Aye.
Russell.
Aye.
Posh.
Aye.
Okay, we are back from executive session. We are back from executive session, and we're gonna move to the next item for discussion, which is hiring of legal representation for city council. So I'm gonna pass this out. But let me, before we actually get into this discussion, I just wanna preface the discussion with some context here. So I want you to know that the council vice president and I have tried to de-escalate this situation by reaching out to the mayor to see if we could resolve this situation before spending what has turned out to be $375 to outside attorneys. And that hasn't worked out, you know, emails, texts, and so forth. And unfortunately, we have not had our Tuesday noon meetings, so there's nothing, no movement there. All these communications that we tried were prior to the mayor hiring Flannery and George Ellis. But here we are. So I basically have two questions. First of all, should council have legal representation? And then if so, who should it be? I did talk to the law director about this, and we would need to, if we did decide we wanted legal representation, we would need to have a letter of engagement. law director, and then a contract, right?
Well, the letter of engagement would constitute the contract. I think you would need a resolution authorizing and directing the execution of the letter of engagement.
So I'll just lastly say, my feeling is anytime there's an investigation, there should be legal counsel. And that legal counsel should be well-versed in whatever the subject matter is, but I want to hear from all of you. Go ahead.
If we get that point, I would like to say I'd like to hire legal counsel, and definitely would want somebody in this case that we're in right now to be have experience representing people who are accused of violating the Open Meetings Act.
Okay.
So we want that background. I don't see that in here. Dean Pure.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, I would just say, so,
We would have an interview.
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. First of all, we got to decide if we believe this is necessary. Go ahead, Councilman.
The only thing I want to say about this at this point, and it's because, and this is the only thing I really wanted to stress to this council tonight, and my colleagues specifically, is that I know we've heard a lot about the reasoning behind this and the need that for you and Council Vice President to meet with the mayor. And somehow maybe those meetings will help resolve this. But I just wanted to make it clear from my point of view that that's a separate issue, and what's happening with the mayor is a separate issue from how this impacts me as a council person on this council, and seeing the whatever that meeting was and those agendas and the amount of trust and collaboration and the impact that it does on how I'm heard and seen and doing my job. And so I just want to express to my colleagues that this isn't just something that the administration and you need to work out. I feel like as an elected official, that I was left in the dark in many cases, and definitely at least in some subjects that I know touch a committee that I sit on. And so as we talk about this conversation, I hope that it's coming across that, and I can't speak for anyone else at this table, but I feel like there's a huge trust and trust gap here, and there's a major issue here. And I don't want anyone to think that some meeting with the mayor is going to resolve our collaborative issues here at this table. I feel like I was left out in the dark in many cases, and I'm even trying to figure out how to navigate the housing meeting I'm supposed to have tomorrow, because I feel like I'm walking into something that's already happened. So I think that those things, no matter what we do and what attorney we get, those are things that need to be addressed on this council. I think the culture of collaboration and teamwork that doesn't have anything to do with the mayor. So I recognize that there's some need or desire to meet with the mayor, but I don't want that to be the distraction from the fact that there are colleagues at this table who feel like they've been left out in the dark as we navigate this. And so whatever this council decides to do, I just want to make it clear that this isn't just something that the mayor has put up. I've got my own feelings about this, and so I'm hoping that we can come to some resolution as well. And so that's just what I want to say.
No, I hear what you're saying, but right now, first of all, nobody's saying that a meeting with the mayor is supposed to resolve personal issues with, that's never crossed my mind. So that is not the reason why we would meet with the mayor. But I just want to hear from everybody as to, first of all, whether or not a majority of council feels that we need to have legal representation. Councilman Bosch?
We have to hire somebody. I mean, we have a law director who serves the city well, but is conflicted in this issue and can't represent council. When I hear everything about this in the newspaper, I mean, nobody is talking to at least one council person about it. And we are essentially the whole council seems to be demonized for 3 people within our ranks that had a meeting. And, I think individually, I need to find representation for myself, just if there's an inquiry that involves me. But I think council on a whole, absolutely needs to be represented in this issue. There's just too much here. I think it is highly political. There's an election next year. It's too coincidental that the people that generally would run against the mayor next year would be council members. And not me, just saying. But I think it's very, very important that we get the representation that we need because for the sole reason that our primary person has a conflict.
Others?
I agree.
I really need everybody to weigh
Oh,
in.
I agree with Posh, Councilman.
Petrus?
I do support hiring outside counsel. The one thing that I would request is we receive this bio right here. I would request that we receive information about, I don't know, maybe at least 3 different individuals so that we could talk with them. And I don't know if it's best for us to research potential people or to ask the law department to assist us with that, but can't remember who said it. Maybe it was Councilwoman Larson who said someone who specializes in Open Meeting Act allegations. So those are things that I would think would be important.
And just so you know, Council Vice President and I interviewed 2 people. DePiro's one. The other person we interviewed did not, actually today informed me that there's a conflict of interest. So, and, you know, but this is, as far as I'm concerned, this is wide open right now. Councilman Cobb?
I'm troubled by the whole thing going on, and I have to be measured in my words that city resources are being spent to investigate council, and now further city resources are apparently going to be spent to hire an attorney to represent council because of some allegations made against some council members. It's sad, but you know, you guys, the majority of council, it seems almost like a conflict of interest that we would vote on providing ourselves legal representation because of alleged misconduct by some council members. I wish there was another way of an independent body or person determining whether council ought to be hired or it ought to be at the personal expense of council members. I don't know. I don't know how I'm going to vote. Obviously, I have no say in blocking the mayor's ability to hire an outside law firm. So I don't know what I'm
If
going
you
to do.
could, would you?
I would like to see this resolved without the necessity of having lawyers involved on both sides.
Okay.
It's going to get ridiculously expensive.
That's what I said up front. Go ahead.
There's another piece to this, and one of the allegations that, again, I read in the newspaper about how you're trying to connect the dots. I mean, first of all, I've talked to a lot of lawyers about this, or they've called me about it, with the evidence submitted. They don't think that there's anything there. I mean, the tact is you go to the common pleas court and you put a case in front of them to let them determine. I mean, I think that's really what, if the parties that be in the city administration feel so strongly about it, then just take it to the court and get it done and get it behind us. But there is another issue here, and again, I get the information from the newspaper because it's being played in the press because nobody's meeting with us,
Right.
especially, selfishly, me and other people around this table.
I've been out of town, so I haven't met with anybody.
Well, we're being accused of, council's being accused, I'm council. For me, I think of this as being slanderous, okay? I mean, yeah, just from my own personal perspective, but I'm not here personally, I'm here, I hope, representing the people in Cleveland Heights. There's another troubling issue here, and that is, again, what was printed with the majority. I mean, if we have council committees that have 3 individuals, if 2 of them meet, then you're having an official meeting. So if I reach out to Gail, for example, because I'm gonna be like, well, hold on a second, because
Hold on a second. I don't think we should be getting into the facts or so-called facts of the case. I think I think the issue in front of us right now that I've tried to put, and believe me, I'm not trying to squat, I just want this to be productive and we need to make a decision.
Well, then just let me finish and I'll be done in a minute. But if I contact Gail because I'm gonna be late for a meeting, have I just broken the open meetings law? I mean, because that is sort of what's been insinuated, where if the two people talk about any city business, you know, you're effectively breaking the law, which is, in my mind, totally ridiculous. But maybe we need to have legal counsel to tell us, hey, look, you do have a problem with how your committees are organized, and you're gonna have to fix that. So I think that there's other work regarding this that council would be able to help us with.
I don't think there's any reason why we couldn't get into, I mean, at least the council, Vice President and I couldn't bring, there are 4 of us that have retained, that might not be exactly the right word, Mike Unger, to represent us for free. He said, don't use the word pro bono, for free. And, he certainly suggested that he would be glad to accompany us. The mayor could be with whoever he thought he needed to be with. And we could see if there's a way to go forward without all of this. I'm all for that.
Mr. President.
But I have no idea if, you gotta have an agreement. I understand what you're saying about the money, but
Mr. President.
right now, I just want to finish one thought. Right now, Flannery and Georgelis have sent all of council an email saying basically get ready. We're going forward. So I'm just reacting to that. Go ahead.
But we keep saying again, we can sit down and both sides can sit down. And that's where, again, I'm telling you, I feel invisible, and I'm hearing it again now. Nothing that you're saying makes sense in terms of sitting down with our attorneys or you and her with the mayor. I am a member of this council. If the mayor hadn't done it, I could have filed that complaint. I could have filed a lawsuit. I could have started an investigation, and then we'd still be right here. And that's what I'm stating. I don't think that I'm being heard because that's not being addressed. What I saw was enough to bring offense to me and bring alert to me in terms of the work that I'm doing at this table. So we looking for an outside solution to your colleagues, to me, is a little bit insulting, because no one at this table has even tried to make at least 3 of us feel comfortable at all about any of these conversations. And some of this stuff has already gone on the agenda, already gone through legislation, and we're going to be discussing it over the next couple of weeks. And so although I understand this is an investigation, we all saw what we saw. And so I'm looking for a way to move forward, but I can't do that if everything keeps getting pointed back to, well, if the mayor did this or the mayor did that. I am a duly elected council member. And I feel like I was left out of deliberations. I was left out, and it makes me replay everything that I've experienced over the last couple of those council meetings that I've seen in there. Every time I was cut off, every time I was pushed back, every time I was told I was crazy now. And so that has to be addressed. This council isn't going to move forward no matter how many meetings we have with the mayor if the people at this table can't trust each other when we come to this table, that the conversations we're having are open and collaborative. And so I'm struggling with signing in for an attorney for something when I know I don't meet with any of you. I can't even get a phone call. And that's something that even you committed back in January when I stated I felt this way. And here we are. And we still have not had a conversation or communication. There's no talk about anything that happens. Decisions are just made.
But right now,
and so what I'm saying is you're asking 3 of us who weren't connected in this to help make this decision. And it's very difficult when I don't even know exactly what the heck happened.
Okay.
And I feel like I'm not even being acknowledged or heard that something happened. And at least 2 of my colleagues from my housing committee for tomorrow's meeting seem to have already met about topics that are on that agenda. That's a problem for me. And the mayor can't solve
I understand what
it.
you're saying, but the mayor is the one that brought this forward. He said it's city council. He didn't name people. So this is the way we have to do it. This has, we keep talking about 2 different things as if they're somehow going to merge, and they're not. One issue that's before us is we are going to be investigated. City council, 7 people.
Mm-hmm.
This is an issue for the 7 people sitting at this table. You could say, yeah, but somebody else could have done, but that's not what happened. The mayor, I'm pointing to an empty chair right now, but the mayor is the person that brought this forward. The mayor is the person that hired this firm for $375 an hour. And we did get an email from that attorney letting us know what to get ready for. I think we need to decide right now if we want to get ready. Councilman, you said that you'd like to see some interviews. If this is one person, I'd be willing to interview that person. I'd be willing to, there's 5 people that have said that they believe we need an attorney. Am I correct? I got Posh, Larson, Petrus, Russell, and myself. So I'll be able to write my name down. How do you want to proceed? Because we're like already late for going out. You want to set up a special meeting to interview attorneys?
You're asking.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at you, but I'm asking everybody.
It sounds like that's an appropriate way forward. If we don't already have other potential people identified, if the law department could assist in identifying some folks or some firms, I think that would be helpful. And it just seems like interviewing people is the appropriate thing to do. But if there's a different route that we should take, then I'm open to that.
I think the law department wants to stay neutral and stay out of this totally. So I don't think it would be fair to ask them to help us look for an attorney, because we want to keep them neutral so that they don't feel like they're on one side of the fence or the other.
Madam Vice President,
Yes.
that part is certainly true.
Okay.
But I also still feel that I and the law department have an obligation to council to provide general legal counsel about public law issues affecting the city and the council. So in that vein, I have talked with the council president about potential folks that council might consider. I'm
Okay.
making no recommendations.
Okay,
Who, have experience in the public law sector and experience with Open Meetings Act issues.
okay.
Again, to the extent that that is helpful to council, I think that's a good thing. You'll decide to hire someone or not hire someone, and you'll make a decision if you do about who you're gonna hire. I did also want to say that I think if council goes forward with regard to interviewing, I don't think at this point in time that can be done in executive session. And so I just wanted to make that clear for all of council. I realize how things may feel for council, but there's no imminent litigation that the law would recognize at this point, and you're not hiring or appointing a public employee or a public official that would allow you to go into executive session. So you can certainly have those conversations. I just wanted you to understand that they would take place in July.
Go ahead.
I think it's a great idea to have those conversations in the open, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be kind enough to share that list with all council members?
Sure, yeah.
And maybe I think the way to proceed is for us to review the list. Just because of my line of work, I've worked with a lot of lawyers, I'm gonna make some calls on my own. I hope everybody else does the same. You're our leader. I would like to be able to let everybody know I'm gonna reach out to you, and I'm hopeful that whoever we put in front of you, we'd be able to have an interview with.
I'm fine with that. I mean, I found 2 people and only one of them is still in the game. And by the way, I didn't want to make any recommendations because I didn't even know if everybody believed that we needed counsel. Go ahead.
Firstly, for clarification, do you want us to do our own research and
Yes.
identify? Okay. And then secondly, I would support having a special meeting later this week
Same here.
so that we can get the ball rolling.
So we could research the different potential lawyers and communicate those with you, and then we can put them on the agenda for a special meeting. Is that
Yes,
the way you wanna do it?
yes. Is that okay with everybody that we see who we can get? Because that's,
So long as, Mr. President, you're doing that from one council person only to you, not
Yes.
responses with everybody on there and deliberation and so forth.
okay, thank you. Anybody else? All right,
We're gonna do something later this week, we need to figure out If we're gonna do something later this week, we need to figure out what.
Probably do a doodle. I'm
want me to
really
just do a doodle?
better on Friday than any other day for me. But, you know, we also need a couple of days at least to look around, you know,
Can we do a morning?
I mean, I'm okay with Friday morning.
I think a lawyer would probably be more beneficial. I'm sorry.
Well, I think you would probably wanna just discuss first, and we're not gonna do interview first.
That's what,
Well,
that's what he was
we
talking
could.
about.
I mean, I'll certainly ask anybody that I think is a proper candidate to come, and we'll do it just the way Director Hannah said, with you just directing any of your suggestions to me. And it'll be one way.
Without everybody on.
But what we do need is a time, you know, so we can,
I just wanted
So
to
send
check
the
with
doodle
Jim.
poll.
right,
For
but
Friday.
I mean, before, we need to agree on a time,
And a
because we
date, so-
can't tell people to show up if we don't know what time, you know.
So he was asking today if anybody had a time or date. He said Friday.
Yeah,
So he
Fridays,
was looking at a time.
I'm just thinking about,
I'll ask my boss in the morning if I can take the day off.
okay, well,
You don't have to take a day off. You can
Yeah.
do it in the evening.
or you know, just
Or
pick a couple
Thursday.
hours, I mean, it won't be all day.
Okay, so do you want me to send you like my availability?
Yeah, when you, if you don't know now, is everybody okay with Friday as a possibility?
Not in the morning.
Not in the morning? Okay,
What
is
about
everybody,
Thursday?
is everybody?
No, I'm just thinking
I
about
can't,
people's
I
Friday
can't do it,
evening.
I can't
Oh,
do it
okay.
Thursday.
Okay.
That's why I said Friday.
Oh, okay. All right.
So can we try to do it Friday afternoon? No, you don't have to,
Friday,
I just want Addie to send out a doodle poll that's possible, that's all. We don't have to make a decision on the time right now, because you have to find out, Councilman Cobb,
I'll have to look at my calendar.
okay, so, all right. I understand why people weren't prepared for a particular time, because we didn't even decide whether or not we were gonna go forward. All right, with that, this committee of the whole meeting is adjourned.